Would you like to see some Oldhammer artwork? Here we have a very good looking, famous piece of artwork which appears to be a Space Marine version of the famous photograph depicting the taking of Iwo Jima in the Second World War. The one with the American soldiers lifting the flag together. You know, the one I mean. So as we already know, these are Space Marines, and they are painted by one of Warhammer 40,000's best ever artists, in my opinion, Dave Gallagher. Dave is responsible for a lot of the best Warhammer 40,000 art from back in the day, and I strongly suggest checking his work out if you haven't already. So this piece of art was used as cover art for at least 2 publications or products that I can think of. Firstly, it was on the front of the Space Marine paint set, a paint set I have fond memories of owning myself. And secondly, it was on the cover of Fantasy Miniatures 3rd edition, which was a Golden Demon winners hardback book. I think they only ever made 3 of those, which is a shame as they're really nice. Amusingly, at first glance, I always think there's only 3 Space Marines in the piece: the Salamander, Blood Angel and Ultramarine. It always takes me a little longer to notice the Space Wolf in the middle. I think it's because his colours are similar to that of the flag perhaps. Unintentional camouflage maybe, or I just need to get my eyes tested. On the left hand side of the piece is a Salamander. No, not the little reptile, but the Space Marine chapter. This one here is in the Salamander's pre-reboot dark green, as opposed to the more mid-green they are these days. I reckon these dark green ones look better, but I'm interested to hear what you think. Should they have changed the colours? Also, this chap has a lovely haircut and what appears to be a Padawan braid. I wonder who his master is. Lots of people over the years after seeing this piece of art ask why the Space Marines are carrying a banner with an orc's head on it. Well, it's not an orc, it's the Golden Demon, from the painting side of the hobby. It was the cover art of a paint set after all. My name's Marcel, and this is Snakeworks. Now, back in the day, Blood Angels didn't have blood red paint. They actually had something called Blood Angels Orange, or was it just Blood Angel Orange? And I think the base colour you were supposed to use for them was called terracotta, you know, like a plant pot. But I remember it being a bit reddier and browner. Isn't terracotta just orange? Maybe it depends on the type of clay used. I'm not a clay expert, so I wouldn't know. You may now kiss the bride. Congratulations, you're now married to a Warlord Titan. Or is it an Imperator Titan? Whatever the case may be, she looks like a beautiful blushing bride. So like we said before, what we have here is probably a Warlord Titan. I don't think Imperator Titans existed when this art was created. Sadly, we don't know who the original artist is for this piece, so please, if you know, let us all know in the comments below. The head of this Titan looks proper strange, doesn't it? Very weird. The mouth area is all open with a gothic arched window motif. It reminds me a lot of the top of the Tower of Pisa. I went there a few years back, and this is sort of how I remember it. It might, however, have been completely different as I've slept since then, and my memory of such things isn't the best. Also, it looks dangerous to stand about in, as you could easily fall out to your death, unless there's windows there, or a force field. Whatever the case may be, I still think it looks really good, and I'd love to see a head in this style make a comeback. This Titan here is from an unknown Titan Legio, but there are a couple of clues there that suggest it's from Legio Ignatum. I think I can make out a few wasp-related motifs. The logo and mascot of the Fire Wasps, if you will. I guess it's not really unknown, is it? More just unconfirmed. The weapon we can see at the bottom of the picture is quite an interesting one. It looks a bit like a giant heavy stubber, but also it still doesn't look big enough to be a Titan weapon. What is this? Some kind of secondary weapon, or just part of a much bigger weapon? I'm intrigued as to what you guys think that is. Behind the Titan in the background in silhouette is the Tower of Orthanc, Saruman's base. I feel Saruman might have won his battles if he had a Titan. That also sounds like a weird YouTube video. Who would win, 40,000 orcs or a Warlord Titan? What do you think the outcome would be? I want to see this video. We bring you footage now of the recent Black Friday sales in the Warp. This year has been the busiest yet, with a lot of Slaaneshi products on everyone's wish list. I picked up a few myself. I'm pretty sure that you guys know that what we're looking at here is a whole bunch of demons again. Sadly, by an artist I cannot identify, so please let us all know if you know. There's no clues or anything that I can see. Maybe someone recognises the art style. In the top left of the picture is quite possibly the best demon design I've ever seen. A Slaaneshi goose. Or is it a duck? I suppose it could be a swan, that might make more sense. I'm no ornithologist, so I don't know too much about birds. I do, however, know the difference between a chicken and a turkey. Also, why does this one have a rubber mask on its beak? But that's very Slaaneshi indeed. Whatever the case may be, I feel a miniature of this needs to exist. And perhaps, back in the 1980s, one did. Near the Slaaneshi duck's leg, we can see what looks like a cross between Slimer from Ghostbusters and a Great Unclean One. This demon is fantastic, in that it's toting one of the greatest handheld weapons of the 1980s, a knuckle duster. You don't see many of these around anymore, do you? I think people just moved on to knives. Actually, thinking about it, I don't think I've ever seen a real knuckle duster in the flesh. I have, however, seen knives. On the right hand side of the picture is yet another character I'm sure I recognise. The evil crow from the really old kids TV show, Orville and Cheap. For some reason nobody ever remembers it. Maybe I dreamt it. I remember it being weird. Very weird. Hang on, let's look it up.
If only I could fly, then I a proper bird would be. In sky I float quite free.
Crow could not understand why they did not attempt to run away.
Ah, okay, so it was Orm and Cheap, not Orville. The crow was still scary though. And at the bottom, slightly to the left, underneath the stabbing arm, is a demon that appears to be all mouth. It reminds me of a young lady I used to work with. That poor girl had a bit of a reputation for being the workplace bicycle. Not that I would know myself, it was just rumours and stories. Honest. Now I love seeing demons fighting each other, and apparently they run as well. It just adds that extra bit of depth to the universe. Do you think demons spend a lot of time fighting each other in the Warp, or do you think it's a rare occurrence? What else is there to do in the Warp? Now, if you fancy coming to discuss the day-to-day activities of demons in the Warp, or anything else hobby related, then please feel free to come along and join us on our friendly Discord server, which is not behind a paywall. Here's a link to that in the description below somewhere, and I'll also stick one up here for you. We look forward to chatting to you there. This here next picture depicts what looks to me to be a Chaos Space Marine, or Renegade as they were known at the time. Sadly, I don't know who the artist for this piece is, but if you know then please let us all know. There is, however, a little logo or signature on the bottom right which might be a clue. Does anybody recognise it? To me, this gentleman, this denizen of the Warp, reminds me of a character we might have seen in the old Hero Quest game, or perhaps one of the enemies. Not the current new one, which looks hideously generic and is always on massive discount as nobody wants it, but the old 80s version that people like. The difference is, this guy has a gun. I don't think there were any guns originally in Hero Quest. Seriously though, if they did release the OG Hero Quest, I think it would make bank. Why don't these companies ever give us what we actually ask for? Now this guy has one of the best helmets I think I've ever seen. He doesn't have your typical bulbous shiny helmet. He has a ribbed helmet with double-ended horns on it. The horns also end with a pair of balls, and I think it looks fantastic. Not good enough for me to get my own and wander around in public in, but good enough for a miniature. I suppose you could cosplay as this guy, but you'd need to buy some things online from Bad Dragon to make those horns, and that might give the postman a fright, or your partner, when you open the box. After spending a few minutes looking at this picture, I don't think it's actually a Space Marine at all, just a Chaos Warrior of some sort. I know this because Space Marines have armoured legs, and this guy has no trousers on. I suppose maybe his armour was so damaged he took it off. That would be an interesting thing to see. They're naked-legged Space Marines. Also, with his legs out like that, he's going to catch cold. I think the weapon fused to this chap's arm is a plasma gun of the Rysar variety. Rysar pattern, I think, is the correct term. The Rysars are my favourite type of plasma gun pattern, as I like the fat look of the big tip they had. We don't see that so much these days. Does anybody know why? Now, I think this guy might have just got up out of bed and is still half asleep. He appears to have put his shoes on the wrong feet. That's got to be uncomfortable. Also, that's probably the reason he forgot to put his pants on too. Which reminds me, I've had dreams before where I turn up to work naked. What the hell are those all about?
Sir, I'm sorry to bother you, but I think you just executed the wrong guardsman.
So what we're looking at here is a Commissar of the Imperial Guard and a random Imperial Guardsman. Maybe his little runner or tea-making assistant perhaps. Again, the artist eludes us, so if you know, please let us all know, because these things are important. Our Commissar here is wearing typical Commissar attire, a look which hasn't changed since the 1980s. A big buttoned black leather trench coat thing with a black peaked cap. I bet both those items have proper military names, but I don't know them. But I bet one of you guys do though. A skull on the front of the Commissar's hat is a very happy smile on his face. Maybe he's a bit of a masochist. Unless it isn't a face, then it's just that weird effect where humans see faces in things. Again, it has a name, but I've forgotten what it is. The weapon the Commissar is holding is supposed to be a bolter, but I think it looks more like the love child of said bolter crossed with an Uzi. I think the closest weapon to an Uzi in Warhammer 40,000 is probably the auto pistol, unless you can think of a closer match. Our Commissar has a fantastic pair of leather gloves on. They have the biggest cuffs on them that I think I've ever seen. They look like those big lampshade looking things that dogs get from the vets and wear around their necks to stop them licking their balls, or whatever they're for. Now thinking about it, as those things come from the vets, I would assume they're for the dogs to prevent them from licking their own gashes and wounds and things. To prevent infection. No one wants to see an infected gash. That wouldn't be good. But, talking of things that are good, if you're enjoying this video then please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. Did I say subscribing right? That means you, Robert. Now if you are enjoying the content on the channel then please consider joining us on Patreon, the link to which is in the description below or up here somewhere. Or you could even become a channel member, which is becoming all the rage these days. Again, there's links to that in the description below.
Welcome, wrestling fans, to the Royal Rumble in the Warp 1986. This year featuring the Changes of Ways Tzeentch against the current reigning champion, Nurgle. What a filthy bastard he is.
Can you remember Royal Rumbles? They were really good when I was a lad. Now I know that wrestling's all a bit of a sham. It makes it pretty damn pointless. Well, to me anyway. So although it looks like a rumble of the royals, it's actually not. It is in fact demons having a bit of a set to, a domestic if you will. Sadly again I don't know who the artist responsible is for this piece, so please if you know, let us all know. As it's a Rumble of the Warp, this piece is very busy. There's a lot of detail and all sorts of characters are partaking in the action. I think the correct term for this is dynamic. These busy pieces were very popular when 40k was in its early years, and I think it looks wonderful. I never knew if it was an artist's style type thing or actually part of the brief though, and it would be interesting to find out. At the top of the picture in the middle is the guy from our previous picture, Plasma Hand, No Pants, Space Marine Man. I love seeing characters pop up in other pieces of art. This suggests to me there was probably a miniature of this and I feel I need to track it down. Does anyone know what it was called? In the centre of the piece is what I think is the gang's boss. He's being carried on one of those palanquin things that I actually have no idea how to spell or pronounce. It's like the one Xerxes was riding about on in 300, a fantastic movie. Some people have said I remind them of Gerard Butler, which is an interesting comparison. Anyway, the boss guy here is cleaving into some mushroom type thing wearing a pair of trousers on its head like a hat. It looks like an enemy from the Silent Hill games. At the top right hand side of the picture is a chaotic geezer flying on a disc of Tzeentch. I love this version of them as it's literally a disc. A lot more basic and weird in my opinion. These days they look more like weird floating demon stingray things. In my notes I've also written they are platters and I've no idea what the hell I meant by that. Doesn't food come on a platter? Sometimes I amaze even myself.
Some incredible artwork there. If you want to see some more Oldhammer related artwork, then check out the playlist up here somewhere. And as always, thank you very much for watching.